During our current worship series titled Earn, Save, and Give, we have been learning about John Wesley's simple rules for money from his classic sermon, The Use of Money. On the first Sunday, we tried to set the tone for the whole series, that it is not the actual money that we need more, but it is the wisdom that we need more on how we use the money. And last week we talked about the first rule, which is gain, or in modern term, earn all you can. And there were some specific things that we need to be mindful of when we do that. If I remind you from last week, earn all you can, but not at the expense of your health, not at the expense of your soul, not at the expense of your neighbors, if you remember. And we were reminded again to earn in ways that we can honor God. And at the bottom of this, the important question that we really need to think about is, do we consider what we do for a living as a method of a survival, or do we consider it as our calling? So we did think about that. And I hope that you were all able to ponder about this question throughout this past week and in all days that will come. And I believe such change in our perspective about our job, whatever we do for our living, that passion, that sense of purpose, and that loving what you do and what you are committed to do is in the foundation of that first rule: earn all you can. The reason that I gave you this lengthier version of summary of what we talked about last week is because what we're going to talk about today is only conditional of that first rule. So having earned all we can, we move to Wesley's second rule, which is to save all we can. Save all we can. And let me be upfront with you. Saving is something that is not natural to me. It's difficult to save for me. And I say that because I think there's a difference between saving and not spending. Right? There's a difference. I can be really good at not spending money. I can be cheap, and I can be very conservative. And I can go through my credit card statement and ask, Hyun, what did you buy on November 18th from that online store? I said I can do that, but I won't do that because I know the end of that road. But saving is a little bit different. So what does John Wesley mean when he encouraged us to save all we can? And I would like to share two stories with you today. The first story is about Collier brothers. I don't know if you remember or know that name. Collier brothers in the early 1900s in New York City. So Homer and Langley Collier, the brothers, moved into this 3-story brownstone on 5th Avenue in Harlem, New York City. They were well educated. Homer was so smart that he got his bachelor's degree when he was only 20 years old. And Langley became a pianist who later played at the Carnegie Hall. And later on, when their parents moved out from the house of the house where they grew up, the brothers moved back into that brownstone house. And they never left, and that's where they died in 1947. They were discovered when someone called to the police after smelling a dead body coming from the house. When the police arrived, they were unable to get through the front door because of the mountains of junk piled behind them. They climbed in through a 2nd-story window and found Homer, who was blind and deaf, in his chair. He had been dead for several days. Langley was nowhere to be found. 3 weeks later, they discovered his rotting corpse, crushed under hundreds of boxes. He was the victim of one of the many traps, booby traps, they said to protect their possessions from intruders he had imagined were trying to break in and steal their stuff. The house was packed with 130 tons of junks, including old newspapers, old books. They had 25,000 books, 14 pianos, 2 organs, and they even had a baby carriage. This was a result that was based on their fear and worries. And I know that Collier Brothers' story is an extreme case of a paranoia and a mental disorder, but I think we can all share that anxiety and worrying part of us in regards to our possessions. Like the man with the 1 bag of gold from Jesus' parable. It might feel safe. It might feel safe for us to dig a hole in the ground and hide the master's money. And here's the second story, and it's about Dorothy Ebersbach. Do you know her? Ever heard of her? Okay. So young Dorothy immediately fell in love with the experience that she had on a seaplane with her father. After Pearl Harbor, she became one of the 1,800 women who formed the Women's Air Force Service Pilots, also known as WASPs. She spent the war years ferrying new planes from factories to military bases, testing newly repaired planes, and towing targets for the male pilots to practice their dogfight skills. In 2010, Dorothy and her fellow WASPs were awarded the Congressional Gold Medal for their service. And her response about that medal was, "I was surprised. It was more than I expected to receive." After the war, she graduated from the nursing school at Case Western Reserve University and worked as a public health nurse until her retirement in 1975. Early in life, Dorothy's father taught her the wisdom of saving and investing. Though she never earned a large salary, she used her money wisely and invested carefully. Across the years, her wise investments grew. As a lifelong Methodist, she consistently supported the ministry of the church with her financial commitment. And when she died in 2011, her estate completed a $4.7 million donation to Case Western, the college, to establish a Dorothy Ebersbach Academic Center for flight nursing, combining her passion for flight, nursing, and education. And you may say that one is also an extreme example, right? However, the point when John Wesley was trying to make when he said, "Save all you can," and the point from our scripture reading today, the idea of saving is not about hoarding or being cheap, but it was more about how we use our money. And Wesley wanted his people to make use of money in ways that are consistent with God's purposes. That's the point we want to learn today, if any. And the challenge is not only about having that ability to differentiate between saving and hoarding, but the bigger challenge for me, as I understand, is the actual upstreaming swimming. It's like upstreaming swimming we feel in this culture when it comes to saving. While it is obvious that we live in the culture focused on consuming, but more so because the fact that it is such a fast-paced culture, where our expectations are immediate, even our expectations for gratification is immediate. I mentioned that acronym YOLO, you know, Y-O-L-O before, which was a thing that went viral a few years back, and it stands for You Only Live Once. And it is an expression of the view that one should make the most of the present moment without worrying about the future. What a sweet temptation. But at the same time, it makes saving harder to put into practice. So for those of you who find it helpful with some practical examples of how to face such challenge, this is only one of the example approach. And one of the practical and very simple approach to managing money is called the 10-10-80 plan. 10-10-80 plan. And this is what I use. And what it means is 10% for God, 10% for the future, 80% to live on with gratitude and joy. 10-10-80 plan. It's a simple. I didn't say it was easy. It's a simple one to consider. The first 10% of our income goes to God's work in this world. It's called tithe, and we practice it because it's more of an act of spiritual discipline that helps us organize our lives and our resources around our commitment to Christ. And the second 10% of our income goes to the future. And this part is what John Wesley was talking about when he talked about the second rule about money. It is what we save in order to meet both the expected and unexpected needs of the future. And that leaves 80% for us to live on with gratitude and joy, again, in ways that are consistent with God's purposes. The challenge in following this 10-10-80 plan, or any other savings plan that works for you, is because our culture encourages us to live beyond our income. James Harnish says that for many of us, what keeps us from saving all we can is not the high cost of living, but the cost of high living. Does that make sense? What keeps us from saving all we can is not the high cost of living, but the cost of high living. Whichever method you choose, either the 10-10-80 plan or something else, the point is about taking your time to reflect and reorganize our lifestyle in respect to how we utilize our resources. So I invite you to take your commitment cards with you and pray throughout the week about it. And when you pray about it, remember that it's about sitting down and taking that time to think about how you can reorganize your lifestyle to make sure that your spending and saving is in line with God's purpose. And I encourage you to bring them next Sunday, as I said before, as we will consecrate them together during the service next week. At the heart of this rule about saving, John Wesley asked this question: Are you a debtor? Are you a debtor or a steward? Are you a debtor or a steward? Because the difference between a debtor and a steward is that even though a debtor is expected to return what he owes, in the meantime, until the time of payment comes, he is at liberty to use it as he pleases. Wesley says, it is not so with a steward. Steward is not at liberty to use what is lodged in his hands as he pleases, but as his master pleases. For he is not the proprietor of any of these things, but barely entrusted with them by another. Now, this is exactly the case of every man with relation to God. We're not at liberty to use what he has lodged in our hands as we please, but as God pleases, who alone is the possessor of heaven and earth, and the Lord of every creation. We have no right to dispose of anything we have, but according to God's will, seeing we are not proprietors of any of these things. Those are John Wesley's words. So Noah has this piggy bank that we bought for him a few years back. And he's pretty good with filling it up with whatever whenever he can, with whatever he can. But the thing I love about this is that there's always a purpose for him. There's always a purpose. The purpose changes time to time. But the part that inspires me is that his purposes are not for himself to get the next thing he wants, but it is usually something that he could get for his mom and dad whenever he feels that there is a need in our household. And the best thing about this is that you can feel that there's this excitement and anticipation when he says, "Mom, I've got this." So this is when he overheard our conversation about something like we need to go grocery shopping because we're out of something, or he would say like, "Mom, I've got this. When I finish fill up this piggy bank, I'll buy all the things you need." And there's that excitement in his voice about all the possible wonderful things that he can do with his savings. There are 3 things that don't exist at a gambling places. 3 things that they take away at a gambling places. The first is a clock. Second, a mirror. Third, a window. Clock, mirror, and window does not exist in a casino. What this is doing is that they are preventing your ability to keep track of yourself and reflect. So as we intentionally swim this upstream and climb this challenging uphill to reflect ourselves upon what Wesley's second rule of save all you can might mean to each one of us, asking ourselves who we could then be the best possible stewards, not debtors, stewards of our resources we were gifted from God. I pray that there will be a level of excitement and joy for that kind of freedom, and a level of thanksgiving for all that God has given us in our upcoming week. Amen.